They say nobody pays attention at a shooting range in Maine unless, of course, you start hitting targets nobody else can even see, and you do it with the kind of calm that makes seasoned cops nervous. You know what I mean? That's exactly how it went down the morning Commander Alexandra Hayes walked onto the range, though. Back then, nobody knew her name, and honestly, nobody cared at first. Not with that beat-up baseball cap pulled so low it was almost a disguise, not with the way she kept to herself, carrying a nondescript case, and not making eye contact with a soul. If you'd asked anyone, they'd have said she looked like a schoolteacher on her day off, maybe a social worker who needed to clear her head. But Frank, the old Navy man who ran the range, noticed something different than always did. 20 years in subs, a decade running this joint, and he could spot the wannabes from the real deal before the first shot. The thing is, Hayes didn't fit either box or hands, the way she checked whined with her cheek instead of a flag, the way she never once looked surprised at her own impossible precision. Those were tells Frank knew from the past, but he kept it to himself. She was methodical, silent, barely noticeable except for one thing. She never missed. Not at 20 yards, not at 300. She didn't need to adjust her scope. She just read the land, the air, the micro-movements of the world around her. Didn't take long for whispers to start. Some weekend warrior in the next lane leans over to Frank. Hey, you see that woman down at the end? Something's off. She's making shots that don't make sense, and she's got no badge, no paperwork, nothing. 20 minutes later, the police are called, not with sirens, not guns drawn, just a couple of local deputies in starched uniforms, trying to look more official than they felt. Ma'am, we need to see your ID and your permit for that weapon. One asks, hand resting near his holster, voice caught between concern and a script he doesn't believe. Hayes doesn't blink, doesn't bristle, just says, I don't have those with me. No wallet, no phone, just a plain key card and a tiny notebook full of coordinates, whatever that meant. They cuffed her. She didn't resist, didn't explain, just complied with his silence, so thick it made the deputies even more jittery than if she'd fought back. In the little county jail, she gave them no thing, no name, no address, just those calm, unblinking eyes. The sheriff's guys ran prints, checked databases, called the feds, but the system was down. The only clue was a scar on her wrist, the kind you get sliding down a rope from a helicopter at midnight, not a rock climbing accident, no matter what she claimed. The public defender, frazzled and fed up, said they were talking terrorism charges now. Through it all, Hayes stayed so calm you'd think she was waiting for a bus, not for her arraignment. Next morning, the courthouse is packed, locals, press, and, weirdly, some men in suits you'd never see in Coastal Harbor unless something big was brewing. The judge, Eleanor Harmon, looked ready to skip lunch just to move things along. But that changed the second the heavy doors swung open and a Navy admiral walked in, medals gleaming, silent but impossible to ignore. Veterans in the gallery shot to attention. Even the judge straightened up. He handed a sealed envelope to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Harmon. She read, went white, then gray, then something else. Respect? Fear? Maybe both. All charges dismissed. This case is classified, she finally said, banging her gavel like she wanted to smash the whole courthouse with it. The room erupted, questions, murmurs, but none louder than the silence as the Admiral turned to Hayes and said, on the contrary, Commander, the Navy apologizes to you. The word commander hit that courtroom like a thunderclap. Suddenly, all the little tells snapped into place, the posture, the discipline, the eyes always scanning exits. Military, through and through. Outside, a swarm of reporters pressed in. The Admiral kept it vague. Special operator, exemplary service, details classified. The sheriff tried to demand answers, but the Admiral only assured him, she's not a threat to your town. Sheriff, if anything, you ought to thank her. Detective Wells, who'd handled her processing, stepped forward, embarrassed. Hayes just looked him in the eye and said, you were doing your job. No resentment, no pride, just respect. The next days brought changes nobody could have guessed. 2 weeks later, Wells gets a call, Admiral on the line, inviting him to a closed-door ceremony at Norfolk. She thought you might want to be there, the Admiral said. Wells hesitated, remembering the handcuffs, the suspicions. But he went. Inside a stark auditorium, no cameras, just uniforms and serious faces, the story unfolded. Hayes, first in her class at Coronado, one of the first women in Naval Special Warfare Development Group, most of it classified. 11 months undercover in Operation Silent Harbor, 16 threats eliminated, a port attack stopped before it started. When her position was compromised, the Admiral said she protected operational security, even at personal risk, including letting herself be detained by police. Afterward, Wells tried to apologize again, but Hayes wouldn't have it. Sometimes you have to commit to the cover, even if it's inconvenient, she said, and for the first time he believed she really meant it. Life moved on. Wells got recruited into NCIS, tasked with bridging the worlds of local law enforcement and special ops, his first assignment thanks to Hayes herself. Months later, he's back in Maine, running new protocols so that nobody ever cuffs the wrong operator again. The shooting range becomes a training ground, a waypoint for people who never stand out unless you know what to look for. And then, just when things start to feel normal, Commander Hayes reappears asking Wells to join a new joint task force, one that will operate in the shadows between civilian and military, chasing threats nobody will ever read about in the news. "You know why we need you?" she asks. "Because you did the right thing, even when it didn't feel right." The range now is more than a place for target practice. Seats become a hub, a quiet recruiting ground for the next generation of hidden protectors. Frank watches a new shooter, young woman, expert with a rifle, college team story that doesn't ring true. He makes a call. Old habits, old network. 3 days later, a man arrives, offers Frank a spot in the Observer's network, just a watchful eye for the next time someone extraordinary walks in pretending to be ordinary. That's the thing most people never notice. Most people never know how close they are to someone who keeps the world turning, keeps the shadows at bay. Commander Hayes may have moved on, changed names, new missions, but her legacy remains in the hands of people like Wells and Frank, people who serve, sometimes in uniform, sometimes just by keeping their eyes open. And you, watching this story from wherever you are, what do you think? Is it right to keep such secrets, to let heroes walk among us unknown and uncelebrated? Or should the truth come out, even if it means risking everything they fight to protect? Let me know what you do in their shoes. Share your thoughts below, because sometimes the most important work happens where nobody's looking.